4 p.m. on September the 4th.
Sir, microphone.
Sorry about that. Do I need to say it again?
Yeah, but nice
Okay.
smile.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's 3:25. I'm called the Kent County Administrative Charging Committee to order on September the 4th. Remember, confidentiality rules apply. No personal information will be discussed in the open meeting. We follow Robert's Rules of Order and adhere to the Maryland Open Meetings Act. Did everybody get a copy of last month's minutes? Any questions? Actually, can I get a motion to accept them?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Old business. Since y'all were here for the PAB meeting, it's basically the same thing. I was going to recap the Coffee with Cop. We know how that went. Gary and I have taken over trying to help with the rules and procedures. Him and I will have a little discussion after this meeting to see where we're at. The one thing I do want to say about that is everybody will get a copy of it for comments, suggestions. Once we all agree to it, we will forward it to Frank and Pete. So if there's any conflicting county stuff in there, they can deconflict it, and then we can make it official. New business, no new cases for us to deliberate this month. Everybody knows about the one-day training on the 23rd of October. You should have gotten a registration saying that your confirmation.
I don't recall seeing one, but that doesn't mean I didn't get it.
You won't be on that one, Gary,
That's good.
but you will be. And
Yeah, I have it on my calendar.
You didn't get a copy, she didn't send you a confirmation?
Not that I recall.
to your email,
Who would it come from?
it would have come from the training commission.
When bounce? I look at my email several times a day, but I don't recall seeing anything.
I can confirm you're signed up. I got a message from her today with the list.
It was like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
some time ago. We'll make
Well, I
sure-
made it off. If it's that long ago, I wouldn't
we'll
remember
make
it.
sure we got it for you.
We're going to jump right into, Shelley had some things she wanted to add to the agenda. You don't have a copy of it, but I'm going to let her discuss. It was 3 items, and that's pretty much why y'all are here, in case we have questions for them.
3 items or 2?
2. Good call.
Thank you. So just some feedback from the ACC, and our group had talked about this a while ago and thought it might be helpful for law enforcement just to have this. The first one, as far as the format for the investigations that have been coming to the ACC, it's, even with only 4 cases, it's been easy for us to see improvement in the process, if you will, which is helpful for us to understand the picture you're painting of the investigation. For example, the naming convention of each of the files within the investigation. We've noticed that in some cases, there's actually been a number put in front of the name, like 01 John Doe. So we know we're going to open that file first, then the second one, then the third. So that's especially helpful when we're trying to look at the file electronically, because in order to read these files in paper, we have to be in our super secret squirrel room with the paper that's closely guarded. And our group tends to prefer to see it in paper, but what I have been finding is that we're getting more adept at looking at it electronically, and when it's easier for us to understand what should come first. then it's easier for us to do that. Then when we get to the paper versions and our deliberation, it's more we are double checking that we didn't miss anything electronically when we see the paper version. Because it is a different process for my brain, at least, seeing the information, whether I'm jumping from, a tab on a computer to seeing it in a hard copy. But the naming convention has been very helpful. I don't know if the investigators just thought that might be a better idea, or it was helpful to them in putting the investigation together, but I can say on our end, it's been helpful, so thank you for that. The other thing, the content, so Gary mentioned this in the PAB meeting, but the investigations have been very thorough. We haven't had a need to even request additional information from any of these cases. And Gary might say, when we were in training, like, that was the thing that I said I will be doing. Like, I will be fine tooth combing every investigation to see what we might be missing and asking for it. And we haven't had that need. So thank you for that. The second thing, well, before we go to the second thing, any comments or questions?
I would like to make a comment real quick.
Yeah.
And I think what she's talking about, this might break it down real easy. The last case you had, the format was, I thought, perfect, right? Because that's what we were talking about. Yours was good and this, but all I'm saying is, the way it was electronically, and I don't know if your guy can look at their case and see how it was spread out for us. That was just it just fit, the pieces fit really good. And your case was great. I mean, all the information was there, but it was a lot of moving around, finding things, making things, we didn't miss something,
Understood, and I was only my comment was gonna be back to you folks, is that I appreciate the feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. That's how we know, and the sheriff's already mentioned it, but it's trial and error. And the first one was, okay, let's hope this works. Second one was a little bit more fine-tuned with the ordering and trying to make sure things flowed a little bit better. And, we'd like to think we'll not have another one for a while, but we will, and when we do, we'll improve on it and take whatever you guys say, take it into consideration and give you guys the best product, because, again, your job's thankless, and, we want to make it as easy as we can, so.
Was that the gist of it?
Yes, it just really will help make it an efficient process for you all, as well as us, if we know that, it's like the last investigation we had, which just happened to come from the sheriff's office. It's not saying that all of the content was good in all four of these. And we figured out what to look at and how we needed to look at. But just opening the last investigation, it was as if I had a paper binder full of old school, like the investigator at your office probably had, but we had it in an electronic version. So I knew I could click on this one, I can go to the next one. It's like I'm thumbing through pages, but, on the computer. So super helpful.
That's exactly what it was. So you guys, as Chief was saying, we're learning, so the first one, and then when we talked to the investigator about the next one, we're like, okay, look, we want a ledger of what everything's going to be and how you would find it. So you have the traditional investigative binders that we've all been familiar with tabs and all that kind of stuff. That's sitting on my desk. And then, of course, we started making the files, the headings the same as the tabs, realizing that in the beginning, our very first one, was probably too much information, and maybe the first thing, scanning in all these things, it's like, well, geez, if you wanted one of the ACC members to go back and be able to find something, now they're thumbing through a number of things to try to find it. So there, they'd just be able to go back to that particular heading and realizing, oh, this is the body cam footage. You know what I mean? Oh, this is the interview of the person making the complaint, and this is the interview of the police officer. So that was just sort of like a way to just get different things laid out there, so you wouldn't have to scroll through a lot of things to try and find it. So we're getting better, as it goes along.
Clearly. And even from the first to the second investigation with Chestertown, you could see that there were already some improvements, and it was all on your end. So, anyway, so thank you for that. Okay, so the second one, a comment regarding, this is a very high-level comment regarding the police agency policies. So when we're comparing what the complaints are and alleged violations, to your policies, it's important that the police policies are consistent throughout your policy documents, and that there are no guidelines in your policies. If you want some wiggle room, then, you know, your policies not being consistent is a good thing for some wiggle room. But if you're really looking to fine tune some areas, you just need to make sure that any section within your policy manual that addresses ABC has to be consistent language throughout. The inconsistencies, just be aware of them.
And I think that came up with some verbiage
Verbiage,
on, yes, that's where that came up.
For example, if, you know, if, this is an easy one for everyone to understand, if profanity in uniform and dealing with incidents is an issue, then the policy needs to be very clear that profanity is not tolerated or is only used in appropriate situations where it may actually be used to de-escalate or keep it vague. It's not for us to say how the agency wants it to be written. It's for you all to really know how you want your people to perform and to what standards are going to be held accountable.
Well, I guess I'll expand on that a little bit. So I think what you're seeing among different agencies within Maryland is they're playing with their policies. You know, it's kind of like they're going to use the word excessive. What's excessive? What's excessive to you is different than what's excessive to me, you know, so what's excessive? You know, for me, it just says being courteous, polite, and professional. What does that mean? You know, I have a certain interpretation of it, and as do you. And as you can see within case number 001, I suggest a finding for being courteous and professional. And you guys chose otherwise. Hey, that's great for my guy. You know, that's wonderful. But, you know, I have a standard that I want to have my people to be, you know what I mean? So, again, the discipline process has been taken out of our hands and given to you. And that's, you know, that's fine. That's a system. That's what we're working with. You know, so that was your decision, and yeah, that's great. Good for him. But, you know, I sometimes, you know, it's very interpretive. And I don't think you're going to find an agency that just says, you know, found abusive language. You know, it's not going to be in there. You know, because, you know, that's, you know, as you know, common language within the police world, you know, and people that we deal with. That's the realities. But, you know, but it's along the lines of me saying being, you know, courteous, professional, and those types of things to somebody, well, that becomes interpretive, you know. So it can be kind of difficult, and a lot of things within law, it's gray, you know. So that's where we have the luxuries of being able to say, here you go, guys, you know, what's your opinion, you know, and whatever your opinion is final. And that's the system that we had, and we respect that. And of course, they have the ability to go to trial boards and things of that nature, but we haven't gone down that road yet. Eventually it'll come, you know, but you know, it's very difficult. And, you know, as you know, our policies are, if you ever look at our printed out policy manual that we have, I'm not kidding you, it's that thick, you know, and I find deficiencies. If I were to read through it, one time I could find 10 deficiencies very, very easily. Then you try to fix those 10 things, and I could read through it again tomorrow and find 10 again. You know, it's just constantly moving document that we have, and we're constantly going through CALEA assessments. We got one coming up on the 8th. You know, it's part of the best practices that we see throughout the country. So we're trying to make sure we're keeping up with certain best practices that we see. So it's just a constant moving document that we have all the time, and it's almost too much for, you know, a law enforcement officer to keep up with. To be quite honest with you, it really is. But, you know, I think for the most part, as Gary Fellows said, you know, we're very fortunate. He knows that we had an incident not too long ago in his town, you know, that caused a lot of police presence. And there were a lot of people that were very unhappy with us. But we did things the way we thought we were supposed to do it. And we had a positive outcome. Everybody was safe. And we don't have any complaints, you know. So, you know, those types of things happen. You know, so, you know, we're out there just trying to do the best that we can. And I can tell you, I know my policies can present problems, you know, but we're learning along the way as well. And I think some of the things that you were brought to your attention within that are going to be corrected on our end. So, if that makes sense, without getting into details.
It does make sense. Bear in mind the point of bringing this up is not necessarily for any agency to make corrections. I'm not suggesting that. Only suggesting that in the course of your duties, just bear in mind, when we are reviewing a case, we have the luxury of not being in danger, not being, out on the road on a call, to look at these manuals, maybe 5 different sections where, sticking with the example, where profanity is talked about. And so just bear in mind that we do have that luxury. And do you want to make things easier for the police officers to really understand what they're being held accountable for? And which I know that you do, and just bear in mind that having some consistent language in all of those sections where something like profanity might be touched upon is helpful for the police officer as well as command staff and us.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're seeing in other places in the state is like their chase policy will be very loose. I mean, it's to the point where, it's kind of surprising, and that's all because of this process that we have here. So where are we moving towards? I don't know. Probably more of a standardization of your policies throughout the state. That's what my guess is. I don't know, but that's what my guess is going to be.
I think that's all that I had in my notes.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
It all goes back to best practices. And you know what? Best practices is a moving target.
It is.
It truly is, because it changes all the time. And you have two best interests at hand. Number one, the officer that's on the street, and the citizen that you're trying to protect. You wouldn't be having a problem with that person or that individual if they didn't create a situation. So, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on instead of going up, instead of at each other. There lies and I think what Shelley's saying is just making it easier and clearer for everybody involved, that when you have to sit down and take time to do the report, that it's clear, it's concise, and it doesn't point a finger, it just puts exactly the circumstances, so it's easy for us and you to present.
But the thing that I don't envy of being the sheriff or one of the chiefs is you have to write that policy for what's in the best interest of your agency and the public, but you don't want to over make that policy so it's impossible to follow. You don't want to say that, like that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the peanut butter always has to go on the left side, the jelly always has to go on the right side.
Listen, Scott.
But there's a flip side of it where, some agencies say, maybe we don't have policy procedure, we have a standard operating guideline, but then you shoot yourself in the foot because you haven't, it's like, who do you want to let be the judge of that? Do you want the officer to take more discretion, or do you want the accountability board to have more discretion? It's kind of one of those, you don't really know at the time kind of things.
Well, it's like the profanity thing, as far as I'm concerned. It's like Shelley said. I mean, and you mentioned, it's just a way of life that we're in now, and there could be a time where the profanity is used as a de-escalation, as opposed to, folks, you don't understand what we're saying here, and there might be explicit terms to get the point across that you guys have to use, and all of a sudden, a little bell goes off and like, these guys are serious.
Yeah.
I understand that completely, but in the everyday world,
We recognize that.
Yep.
And it's
Thank you.
probably one of the reasons why it led us to the decision that we did.
Sure.
Given the circumstances, that it was perfectly okay for the officer under those circumstances with whatever he was being confronted with at that time to respond in kind.
Yep.
I mean, we know it's not kindergarten out there, so.
Yep. No, I completely respect your opinion. That's fine.
And it's good to hear the
Yeah.
understanding of it, quite frankly, that, it's not Sunday school, unfortunately, in many cases. Doesn't give the police the right to talk to somebody like a second-class citizen, but sometimes you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Fellows. Sometimes you just have to speak the language and make the point to put an end to whatever's going on, keep everybody safe. So thank you for that.
Early in my career, I spent 3 years as a probation parole officer in Philly while I was in law school. So I spent a lot of time in neighborhoods that aren't the best dealt with people.
And the training that they gave us for the ACC training, the 5 days, did a really good job of helping people understand, helping ACC members understand the importance of looking at the totality of the situation, whether they had law enforcement background or not. So that should give a little bit of, comfort's a bad word, but I'll just use it, reassurance that the people that go through that training have been given the tools to use in the deliberation process of each of the investigations. And it's my job, as it's his job, to question and maybe counter what my opinion is, like, well, I think it's this way, Shelley, and I'm like, well, I disagree, or I agree, or, sell me on that, but help me understand, because we all come to this with our files, as they call it. Some would call it baggage, life experiences, whatever that is. But, I bring something different to the table than he brings, and that's the value of this ACC. I hope that in the future, if there are, some questions, make sure, like, we send our questions to Frank, to Barry, and then Frank, if there's gonna be dialogue with the law enforcement agencies, and likewise, because we are feeling our way through this, but just know we're giving it 100%, because it matters.
No question, no question.
All right, well, it's all, I don't think we have anything else for these guys. Thank you for coming.
Yes, they do.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to meet with you.
If I can say again, and I think I included everybody, but we do appreciate everything that everybody does with this, PAB, ACC. And I did neglect to mention Frank, but Frank has answered every question that I've had. If he didn't know the answer, he researched and got back to me with the answer. And so I think he's a very, very big asset to the whole
It's because he's the highest paid one.
Yes.
Yeah, right, well, that might be true too. And he may or may not have paid me to say that. On the other hand,
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you all.
Do y'all want to stay and discuss that?
Sure.